one of the things that people will say is like we alluded to earlier, this feels too easy. This feels like it should be harder, and me as a coach, of course, I'm the one from the outside, and I can kind of look at things and I can kind of say, well, you know what, we don't need to do that now. We're getting what it is that we're after. But at the same time, I do like to put little notes, in their spreadsheet. I'll put in there, somewhere that says, right now it feels pretty easy, because I can kind of refer back to that, because if we do need to dig, which we're all going to have to do, and that's one thing we probably all just need to reiterate here is at some point, yes, it's going to suck, and at some point you're going to have to, what's that Navy SEAL term? You're going to have to embrace the suck, because you're going to have to, it's an extreme sport, you're going to have to, it can't be easy all the time, and plus we don't have all the answers, but sometimes I can look at my notes and I can say, okay, what was going on during that period of time where it felt pretty easy? I can kind of maybe find little clues, was their volume really low? Were we during a deload? Were we, was life a little bit easier at that point? Oh, well, look at there, they were off from work for 2 weeks, or something like that. And then I can kind of set things up, kind of like we were talking about earlier, where we or Eric, what you alluded to, what's the most amount that I can get while doing the least, or like our philosophy a lot of times in dieting is how much food can we possibly eat while still getting the fat loss that we're after. I can find little clues in those notes, and I can kind of say, okay, well, we need to dig now. We need to make big strides in weight loss, fat loss, whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish. And I'll kind of look for those little clues that say, okay, what can we do now to kind of set up that kind of environment? You know what I mean? Can we manipulate training variables? And, I'm not above thinking out of the box and doing, like you mentioned, Eric, powerlifting type program for the bodybuilder to where it seems like it's absurdly low, but at the same time, it's still training. The stimulus is still there, and get that same response that we need while still making it feel kind of easy. You know what I mean? Can we set up our cardio, in such a way that, maybe like we kind of learned, it was kind of like HIIT. It almost wasn't worth the bang for its buck in a way, can we just do things a little bit easier? Maybe we can get the cardio we need on a nice hike, or something like that, But those were kind of the things that were popping up in my little pea brain as I was really into your guys' conversation and kind of listening to you. Because, really what it all boils down to is I use this analogy a lot with clients. It's kind of like, okay, the water is boiling and we have the setting at 7. Does it really help to boil the water if we turn it up to 10? What... Sure, it's going to stay boiling, but we're using more electricity. That's always the analogy that I kind of use when we talk about efficiency.
That's a good one. I think it's one of those things where you can intellectually understand what we're saying, and I think probably a lot of our audience is nodding along. But when you actually get there, it is one of those things that it's scary to try something, to feel like maybe I'm not doing what's quote unquote optimal, or maybe I could push harder. And you see this in the resistance against just the amount of hate of the idea of tracking how many repetitions in reserve you might have in some bodybuilding circles is absurd, just because it means you're not training to failure, Yeah. I think you can find this attitude predominantly in a lot of areas, and I think you did a great job of bringing us to the point of acknowledging that you absolutely will have to play the card of pushing yourself to the limit, but it's a question of, is that going to be happening to the point where it shortens your prep or shortens your career or prevents the next season or causes an injury, or is that going to happen only when needed so that you can get to an elite level of performance? A good parallel was that by the time I had done my first show in 2019, I was in good shape. I wasn't in great shape, but I really didn't feel hard. Nothing was hard. And when we needed to start striking, I had a ton of mental reserves to do that. And I got into the best condition I've ever gotten in my life. So I think another parallel would be that, these singles you have in, let's say, a powerlifting prep, they get you to the point where you're like, oh, wow, I'm in striking distance of a PR. And I know that if I do these a little more frequently, it does start to beat me up. But I don't need to do it for 2 months. I don't need to do 5x5 for 2 months to get there. Now I can just in the next few weeks get to the point where when I taper, I'm going to reliably hit a PR on the platform because I was able to get further with less effort and being less banged up in the process. So don't ever think you don't need your card-carrying member of 3DMJ, your dedication, discipline, and desire card that you need to slam on the table every time you decide to take the plunge, because you will. But you don't want to be getting that out right at the start, because that card has a cost. So I think that's a really important point, Brad, is that that's something that play needs to be there. And it's actually a very empowering thing to know I could go a lot harder. If the going gets tough, I can do what's needed. I don't need it now, but that means that I can do a bunch of shows. I can push myself through this whole season. I don't have to take time off work. I don't have to not try to be an asshole so much because I'm just not as much of an asshole because I'm not on 30 grams of carbs, So it allows you to titrate and be just a better human throughout prep in the process. And I think that's probably something that is difficult to appreciate until you've been through the process multiple times.
For me, my hard work button card was kind of like my blankie almost, man. When I was a little fearful, didn't know quite how to get to that next level. It's like, okay, well, we'll just rely on this, And now, for example, I think if I were to show my current training system to myself 15 years ago, that dude would be like, no, we're not. We're not running this, man. We're not. No way. Like, let me add a few things. And it's all out of fear, right? So like you said with the, powerlifting analogy with the singles, doing a little bit more of that, but in a controlled manner. When you know exactly what makes what move, it's a lot easier to just simply focus on the stuff that matters. Like I'll get a bikini athlete who maybe she was doing like 8 different movements for glutes. And it's like, guess what? 3. It freaks them out. And I'm like, we don't got to do more than 3. Like if we like progress on these 3 movements, I guarantee you your glutes will look better. And you're going to feel a whole lot better as well, because we're only using up as much energy as we have to. So yeah, again, a lot of it comes back to if people knew better, they would do better. And why it's so important to understand what is it that is going to, create the adaptations you want, or make you stronger as a power lifter, right? It's a hard sell, because most of us who make it decently far in this, it's because we were able to outlast at a certain point. Like all my training partners that I came up with, like I am here because I was the guy that stuck to it. A month later they were all done, and I was looking for someone to come lift with me and spot me. So I felt like I was, like it was a part of me that I was turning my shoulder to, and it's the furthest thing from the truth. And I can say for myself that, man, if I was born 20 years later, like I think I'd be such a better bodybuilder right now. But what can you do, right? And a lot of it is just because I see all the stuff that's out there in regards to information, and I know that at some point I would have gravitated towards that. And again, when you know more, when you know better, I really am a firm believer that people do better.